Brad, let's go ahead and kick things off here at the top and talk a little bit of former, maybe still very relevant media person. I don't really know. I don't really consume a lot of her content, but Josina Anderson and one of the prominent offshores.
So we noticed this last week. Josina, I think she used to work for ESPN. Now, in her Twitter profile, she says a CBS Sports insider. And you scroll through her Twitter, and it's standard, NFL reporter stuff, quotes from OBJ, chats with Adrian Peterson. And then we noticed that she'd started tagging at Bovada official at the bottom of just, standard news tweets. And then further down, she was doing a show called Bovada Live with Adrian Peterson. And obviously, this stood out a little bit because it's sort of interspersed. It's here's my work at ZBS, here's Bovada, go look at Bovada. And I suppose it's relevant because, CBS has a huge advertising deal, hundreds of millions probably, with Caesars/William Hill. Here's one of its talent, although I believe Josina is a third-party contractor rather than directly hired by CBS. But essentially, it looks like CBS talent is also promoting offshore sportsbooks, and that's been one of the biggest complaints over the last couple of years from regulated books, is that people just simply do not know the difference. Some of that's with the media, and I suppose that's what I tried to find out when I reached out to Josina. I think it's important to say it's not meant to be a witch hunt. I'm not trying to be like,
Sure.
We got you. But my initial question was, did you know this was an offshore sports book? And I didn't hear back initially. But more recently, I would say, it's important to say that she's not doing anything illegal. I think there's probably other TV personalities for ESPN that are also promoting offshore. But from our part, we thought important to point out, like, this is the problem. This is one of the exact problems that needs to be highlighted to kind of help people discern what is illegal and what is legal.
So, Adam, this problem is kind of like twofold, right? It's one, not only her probably doing her due diligence and kind of seeing what product she is endorsing and or helping promote. And then two, even if you aren't officially an employee of said company, if you are doing work for said company, if you are representing said company in whatever it might be, videos, podcasts, even written work, there's bylines and things like that. It seems like there's almost an onus on that company as well, right? To go in and say, like, hey, Josina, you gotta knock that off, right? I mean, this isn't this isn't where we want to be promoting our brand and our stuff anyway. And two, mainly because, hey, we got these really fat advertising deals with these other friends, and we don't want to piss these friends off. So, I think there's a couple of people here that you can kind of look at and just say, like, why is this happening?
And as we get into the discussion of, are you an employee, are you a contractor, et cetera, I'll say this much. When I went to post the story and I searched the Associated Press newswire for a photo, the photo is of Josina Anderson with a CBS Sports mic flag interviewing Eric Weddle after the NFC Championship game. This is someone who's been featured prominently in the coverage of CBS of the NFL recently by that fact. So you're absolutely right that the problem is multifaceted, Matt. And I think it goes back to what Brad said at the jump, that there is still massive confusion, not just among bettors, but among media. And there's massive confusion among media with what's offshore, what's legal, because in the 25-year void between PASPA being enacted and PASPA falling, the offshore sports books did a pretty fantastic job of marketing themselves and going from a PR perspective after big reporters and getting their odds into the national consciousness, right? It was not unusual, wasn't then, it isn't now, to see odds from MyBookie, BetOnline, right, Bovada, et cetera, cited by mainstream media, who often, when you point it out to them, say, oh, I didn't know. Right? We obviously know that difference quite well, but a lot of folks don't know that. And so what Brad said about contacting Josina Anderson, I think he did a great job of reaching out not only to Josina, but to CBS and to Caesars as well. None of them responded with comment, but the response, I think, has been in the pudding, because Josina has not tagged Bovada at any point since Brad contacted her asking that question, even though we didn't get a response.
And Brad, like you said, I mean, this wasn't like a, hey, gotcha moment or anything like that. You're genuinely curious as you reach out stuff like this to say, hey, do you even have an idea of what you're promoting? Because listen, Josina is at least a big enough character here. And Adam, I think this is something you could say as well. This might have been something like her agent brings to her, right? Like it's like, hey, this company says they're going to pay you whatever, $5,000 a month to do 10 tweets a month or something or whatever. And like, if someone says, hey, you're going to pay you $5,000 to put out 10 tweets, I'm probably, if I don't know any better too, I'm probably gonna be like, yeah, sounds good. $500 a tweet, I'm in, And so it's Brad, I think it's like, it was more of just an educational type thing, right? Where you were just looking to say like, hey, did you even really know what you're doing here?
Yeah. And from what I understand, it was set up via a third party. It's not like, it was a third party marketing company set this up. It's not like Bovada came to her and said, let's do this. And I suppose the other point there is, the reason I guess we wrote about Josina and we saw Josina is she's probably the biggest name that's actually doing it. As was pointed out, it's not just her doing it, but unfortunately she's the biggest name. That's a good and a bad thing for her, which is why I guess she was singled out in this story. So yeah, well, it looks like it may have stopped anyway. So I guess whether that was Caesars leaning on CBS leaning on her, I don't know. But perhaps a positive outcome. Who knows?
Yeah, when you take a look, I mean, over on Instagram, nearly 100,000 followers for her over there, and then over on the Twitter machine as well. Hundreds of thousands of followers. So yeah, it's certainly a big platform for a company like MyBookie, and then for Bovada, and then Adam, this kind of goes back to what we were talking about a couple of weeks ago here on the pod. We were like, when there were some specifically named companies that were being targeted for, hey, we need to do something about these specific companies. It does go back to, we understood why it was those specific companies. And this is just yet another reason for us to kind of point and go, oh yeah, see, this is the reason why people want to go after Bovada.
Well, and what you're referencing is that AGA letter that was sent to the Department of Justice that called out Bovada, among others, as asking for the DOJ to help with a federal crackdown, which we debated the merits of that on this podcast. We're not going to get into it as much at this point, but it just goes to show how much confusion there is out there. And, Josina Anderson is a name big enough that I think that whether it's 100,000 followers, a few 100,000 followers, it's someone with reach, right? It's someone who is identified, at least by people who have consumed a lot of sports media, as this is someone ESPN used to feature pretty prominently. So someone CBS Sports is still featuring. And so it's less a matter of the individual and more a matter of the reach in the long run, because what we're looking at here is the legal market still trying to compete to clear up the difference that these other companies are very intentionally trying to keep muddy, right? I mean, Brad can attest to this. I'm sure you can too, Matt, that we get emails still all the time. Even here at Legal Sports Report, we get emails from MyBookie. We get emails from these PR folks trying to get us to cover what they do, which, we can kind of laugh to ourselves, but it shows the reach that their PR still has and what they are still able to do in terms of influencing the general public as to what's legal and what's not.